creationists. I've seen more of your misinformation than anybody ever should have to. That being said, out of all the garbage you've put out, I've never really seen an answer to a couple questions, and I was hoping you guys could help me out with them. The first question is, why does every single test analysis of every single field of biology indicate a nested hierarchy of life? That is to say, the tree of life format as opposed to the creation model. Here is a visual to help you out. Again, every field of biology and every single experiment confirms that this tree of life is the proper, most correct fit, and it completely contradicts your model. I guess going along these lines, why is it that we can take an organism, based on its gene and genomic information, put it into its proper place in that tree of life, which is confirmed by every other independent source in biology? Now, the only answer that I've ever heard to this is same gene, same designer, which is a huge misunderstanding. It's not the similarities, it's not the differences, it's the combination of the two. You can actually think of it as if it's a phone book or a dictionary. Just as you can take a word or name in the English language and place it into its proper place in the dictionary or phone book, you can do the same thing with an organism on the tree of life. Now, it's not just same English language has the same letters. That simply doesn't apply. And your argument of same gene, same designer doesn't apply for the same exact reason. Here's another question. Pneumatic bones are bones with essentially air pockets in them. They make the bones easier for flight, although less structurally sound. For example, birds have pneumatic bones. Yet land mammals, any mammals, do not have pneumatic bones. So, this is interesting in the sense of, what about an ostrich? Ostriches do not fly, yet they have pneumatic bones, which is actually bad because their bones are weaker than mammalian bones, which are solid bone. So if an ostrich was created in its present form, never flew, why does it have pneumatic bones? It's completely contraindicated to life on land. At the same time, mammals have solid bones, but bats are mammals that fly. Why do bats have solid bones, which are bad for flight, instead of pneumatic bones? This is completely the opposite of what we would expect. Why do we see a mammal that can fly having solid bones and a bird which does not fly having pneumatic bones if evolution is false? Evolution requires this. Intelligent design requires it not be the case. I have another question about the distribution of animals. Why is it that we only find certain animals in certain geographic places? There are many animals which are restricted to islands, certain continents, certain places, and this is completely contraindicated by intelligent design. For example, we only find marsupials in Australia. New Zealand, for example, was colonized only by birds. Now, if animals were created, just popped onto the earth, wouldn't we expect to find an even distribution of them? This is the exact opposite of what we find. In fact, evolution, on the other hand, would predict that certain animals would evolve in one place and remain geographically not isolated, but centered around that area. And that's exactly what we find. So why do we not find animals sprinkled all over? Another question. Why do whales have the genes for making legs, humans have the genes for making tails, and chickens have the genes for making teeth? Just a question. If they were all created in present form, they shouldn't have these genes. It makes absolutely no sense. What's also interesting is that you could always say the argument of, oh, well, all these organisms, same designer, he just threw some extra stuff in there, extra blueprint or whatever. Okay. Aside from the fact that that's completely illogical, then, why do humans not have genes for making feathers? Why are these atavistic genes, as they're called, only found in organisms that are related by common descent? It makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. One response to this that many of you have heard is simply that, well, we don't know a lot about DNA, or there's still junk DNA that's not junk. Well, the fact of the matter is, this isn't junk DNA. It codes for teeth, it codes for legs, it codes for fully functional tails. I'm not talking about a tailbone, I'm talking about a tail under skeletal muscle control under articulating discs. Like, this is a tail. Why is that? My next question for you guys is, why exactly is it that the fossil record strictly adheres, without exception, to what evolution predicts? We never find trilobites mixed with elephants, we don't find human beings with dinosaurs, we don't find poodles from the Permian era. Everything is temporally stratified according to the predictions that evolution makes. If everything was created at the present time, wouldn't we find elephants with more primitive organisms? Yet we don't. Why is that? Please note that every single, without exception, that I have looked at, for example, the Paluxy tracks of humans and dinosaurs together, don't hold up. And no serious peer-reviewed paleontologist actually believes that they do. Nobody believes, except for creationists, that those are human footprints. Also note, please don't even mention the flood. If you do, you'll be ridiculed. And that's because even if the flood were literally true, it still doesn't explain the evidence in the temporal stratification that we see. Evolution explains it perfectly. Creationism simply cannot. Next question is, why is a fossil record packed with transitional forms that adhere to the predictions of evolution? Now, I know that the common myth is that there are no transitional forms, but this simply isn't the case. And 2 minutes of searching through peer-reviewed research would tell you that that's how it is. Archaeopteryx, Tiktaalik, there are many others. None of them are seriously disputed by any scientists whatsoever. Why do they exist, and why do they exist how we see? We have plenty of transitions between reptiles and birds, between reptiles and mammals, between fish and amphibians, between amphibians and reptiles, yet we never have any transitional forms between birds and mammals, which is what evolution says that we should not find. Why do we not find those as well? Take a look on the peer-reviewed research. Find me a single peer-reviewed scientific article claiming that Archaeopteryx or Tiktaalik are not transitional forms. Just one. I actually have a playlist of hundreds of transitional forms, all of them backed up by scientific evidence and peer-reviewed research. I suggest you take a look at it. Speaking of transitional forms in the fossil record, can any creationist explain to me how, if evolution is false, Neil Shubin and his colleagues were able to go to the place where amphibians evolved, at the time that they evolved, dig down to that exact level, exact strata, and find an organism that they were looking for that they had never seen before? Explain to me how they were able to do that with that level of precision. So speaking of peer-reviewed research in the scientific community, I have another question. Why is it that so many quote-unquote problems for evolution are never brought up in the scientific community? Now, the scientist who disproved evolution would win fame, Nobel Prize, notoriety, everything that he wanted. Yet all of these supposed problems that evolution has resides only among educated laymen. Why is that the case? Why isn't it in the peer-reviewed journal? Why isn't it brought up at the cell biology meetings, which creationists are, sure, anybody can attend? Why don't they go there and do that? Why do they rely and only speak their information among the uneducated people? Also, in the past 200 years, why has not a single scientific experiment ever discredited evolution? I just looked on PubMed today. It's about the 2nd of February 2009. There were 235,268 scientific articles supporting evolution. There were 0 against it. Why is that the case? Now, is that because there's some big conspiracy against intelligent design, flat earthism, and things like that? No. It's because many of the misconceptions that you people have and you think aren't actually misconceptions at all. It's equivalent to sitting here and saying, well, if the Earth is really round, why don't all the people in China fall off the bottom? You don't understand the big picture. And just as you don't understand and are taking into account gravity when you're looking at that information, you're also not taking into account the complexity of biological life and all the things that go along with evolutionary science when you form your quote-unquote problems. My last question is, what would it actually take to convince you that evolution is true? Is there any sort of experiment that could be done? Any fossil that could be shown to you? Any genomic sequence, perhaps? Or is there honestly no piece of evidence on this planet that could get you to change your mind? Is your mind that simple and closed that it is unopen to any sort of discussion whatsoever? If that's the case, why do you feel the need to go around and comment on evolution and creationism as if there's some sort of argument? Evolution's open to as much doubt as whether or not the Earth goes around the sun, and if your argument's not based on evidence, why are you here?